Do you love freedom? Do you love being clean? Then you'll love Hero Soap Company, made in the USA. Chemical and fragrance free. A portion of each purchase donated to veteran and first responder charities. Initial subscription purchase is matched bar for bar and sent overseas to deploy troops. Let freedom clean. Hero Soap Company.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. Tonight, my guest is Steve Burgess. Before I bring him on, I have to thank our sponsors, C60 Purple Power. C60 is a super antioxidant, free radical sponge, and I don't go a day without taking it. I feel amazing. Check out the benefits for yourself at their website. Click the link in the description or use coupon code KNOWLEDGE10 to get 10% off your order plus free shipping. Check out Curiosity Stream. They're the award-winning destination for documentary series and features. They deliver shows across the full spectrum of the nonfiction genre. Satisfy your thirst for knowledge anytime and anywhere with Curiosity Stream. Just click that link in the description to start your subscription today. They start at only $2.99 a month. And right now is definitely the time to get an emergency food supply. If you've been watching my show, you know that some of the most brilliant researchers on the planet that have been guests agree that there will be food shortages in the future, and you don't want to be caught unprepared. Check out My Patriot Supply. They're the experts in emergency preparedness. Right now, you get $70 off a 2-week supply and $100 off a 4-week. Just click the link in the description, or visit preparewithfkn.com to get yours today. And finally, become a premium member of Forbidden Knowledge News, and you get access to all our shows and presentations, and soon to come, new content creators. Some people that we're very excited about to put out content on our site. This is going to be the Forbidden Knowledge News Network. And if you have a podcast or YouTube channel and you're looking to start something or get your content out there, email me. It's forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Your content could be featured on the network, monetized, and promoted. So come and join us. It's going to be awesome. Visit forbiddenknowledge.news to get yourself a membership today. Now, tonight, I want to welcome Steve Burgess. He has been a full-time hypnotherapist in East Yorkshire, England, and Norway since 1992. And in that time, he has completed over 15,000 one-to-one therapy sessions. He is an internationally acclaimed therapy trainer, running courses for a variety of organizations across the UK and Norway. He is also a former vice chair of the UK Guild of Hypnotist Examiners, and he is accepted as an authority on hypnotic regression, as well as being an advanced EFT practitioner and NLP master. He has completed many thousands of past life regressions with his clients and his books, Famous Past Lives and the Power of Past Life Regression, describe some of his experience in past life therapy. He's appeared on Sky One TV, GMTV, and Yorkshire TV, and has been regularly featured on BBC local radio, and his work has appeared frequently in a variety of publications. He now divides his time between Norway and the UK, and has established hypnotherapy training school in Norway. His YouTube channel is Hypno for All. It contains a variety of his free hypnotherapy recordings. Steve, welcome. How you doing tonight?
Good to be with you, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you so much. You know, I've always been fascinated with the possibility of past lives for years, and I've covered so many topics, but this is my first show on past lives and past life regressions. I've had guests on that do regression, but we've mainly discussed the ET abduction and UFO aspects of this. So I'm looking forward to this. And I do believe that reincarnation is a definite possibility. I also have a belief in collective consciousness and the possibility of multiple realities or timelines occurring at the same time. So that seems to make this topic very complex if that is the nature of our reality. But before we get to any of that, I'd love to know what got you interested and started with your work.
Okay, well, I was sort of dragged into the hypnotherapy profession quite by accident when I was a director of a publishing company which went bust and took some of my money with it. So I had to do something pretty quickly. My father had been working privately as a hypnotherapist for some time because basically what had happened for my father is he'd tried everything to stop smoking and nothing had worked. And eventually, in desperation, he went to see a hypnotherapist, and this hypnotherapist relaxed him in a comfortable chair, fed some hypnotic suggestions into his mind that he was no longer a smoker, and my dad didn't want cigarettes anymore. And my father's a scientist by profession, and he couldn't make sense of this, Chris. It just didn't make sense. You know, his scientific mind frame just didn't accept that something like this could go on. So he became fascinated. He read a lot about hypnotherapy, became so interested, he went and trained as a hypnotherapist and started playing with it at home. So when I was sort of wondering what to do in my life at that time, he said, you know, let's have a look at hypnotherapy. So I went and trained, and it was almost like coming home. You know, some people are naturals at what they're doing. I'm very fortunate. I'm a natural therapist. You know, some people are natural musicians, some people are natural doctors, some people are natural sports people. I'm a natural therapist. It was like coming home, really. So I started doing smoking sessions and nothing else, and then my portfolio just expanded and expanded until, you know, now I treat virtually anything that's presented. Nowadays, most of my work is regression based. How I got into past life regression is actually quite strange and very fascinating because I've been working as a hypnotherapist for about 6 months, and I didn't train in past lives or anything like that. Nobody really used it back in the early 90s, not very much, not in the UK. And then one day a young lad came to, he was in his early 20s, came to me with a severe anxiety state. And it was a very, very bad anxiety state. I mean, he was sitting in front of me, he was shaking, he was stammering, he was sweating, he was stuttering. And as I asked him about his problem, he just sort of said, well, I don't know where it's come from. I've just been like this for a few years now. I've always been a worrier, he said. But the last few years, since the children came along, then I just can't get it out of my head all day long. I'm shaking. I can't sleep properly. I've had to stop working. I can't work anymore. And my wife's sick of it. She's just sick of it. I just sit at home all day worrying and shaking and hyperventilating. And she said, if you don't get it fixed, I think I'm going to leave you. So, of course, that doesn't do very much for his anxiety either. And he said, you're my last hope. I don't know what else to do. We tried medication. Of course, it hadn't worked. In fact, it had made it worse, which it often does, unfortunately. So I thought, okay, well, I said, what started this? Has anything happened in your life that could have caused this? And there was nothing, you know, there were no real traumas in his life. Because usually as a therapist, we're sort of saying, well, you've got this problem. Has something happened a few years before it started that could have caused the problem? Any trauma coming? And there was nothing. So I thought, okay, I'll take him into trance. I guided him into hypnosis, which for those of your viewers and listeners don't know, hypnosis really is a sort of a relaxed state. And he calmed down. He absolutely calmed down. He went beautifully into trance. He lay in my reclining chair. His breathing was nice and slow. His body just slumped. And I thought, great, you know, this is a standard anxiety case. I'll do some hypnotic suggestions, giving some hypnotic suggestions to feel better and less stressed, and we should be okay. So I'm sitting there going through the motions when all of a sudden he started to shake. And he didn't just start to shake, his whole body shaking. He was hyperventilating, his breathing came quick, and then he started to half shout and half whisper. And bear in mind, he's just laying there with his eyelids closed, and I'm sitting in my chair, you know, wondering what on earth's going on. The next thing, he starts to say, hide, hide, hide in here, hide the children, they're coming, hide the children. No, hide, quiet in here, quiet. Then all of a sudden, his whole body started to shake, and he started to scream at the top of his voice, no, not the children, no, ah! And he just flopped down, and it was about 10 times bigger than that, Chris. I've underplayed that, I can promise you. He flopped down in the chair and went, oh, well, I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. Oh, I feel wonderful. I feel so calm. I've not felt like this for years. Oh, I feel so relaxed and so calm. I thought, well, I don't. Just giving me a heck of a shock. I said, what was happening? What were you experiencing? He said, it was weird. It was like I was in another body, in another time. I was a man, and my wife and children were there, and soldiers were coming to find us, and we were trying to hide. And I hid the children. Then the soldiers burst in, and they found us, and they shot us all. And I think I died. He said, what was that about? So I said, well, you've been in a past life. I mean, I knew about past lives, of course, but I hadn't trained in therapy. So I said, how do you feel? He said, I just feel wonderful. I feel absolutely marvelous. And what had happened, Chris, in those 10 minutes, his problem had been completely cured, completely fixed, anxiety just blown away. And he came out of trance, and he was just like a new man. He was a different person. And I thought, why don't I know about this? This is significant. I need to know about this. So I then started to research past life therapy, got in touch with an American association. They gave me information. I started to use it and play with it. And then over the years, I've developed it. So I now have my own regression system, which I train therapists in, which regresses clients back to the causes of the problems, which are either in this life, in past lives, or in our ancestors' lives, because we can inherit trauma from ancestors. And so now I've done so many thousands and thousands of past life regression sessions, it's almost countless now.
Now,
so that's how I got into it.
You said you believed in reincarnation before you started doing the therapies. When did you come to realize, that reincarnation was a thing?
I was 13, and I think I had a bit of a spiritual crisis because I was struggling to make sense of the world. And I read something about reincarnation, and suddenly it started, the whole world started to make sense. That we live many lifetimes, that there's the law of karma, as you sow, so shall you reap, etc. And it started to make sense. And so then I started to look into Buddhism. And I then, in my sort of mid-30s, I started to look at Buddhism very seriously and started to practice it as a Buddhist. But I also saw a TV documentary about an Australian hypnotherapist who did some incredible past life regressions. And in one of them, the evidence for that regression being real was so overwhelming. Nobody on this earth could say that what that woman explored in the past life was in her imagination, because the evidence was so incredible. And so that hit me in the face even more. This is real. And of course, now having done so many thousands of past life regressions and seen the benefits and researched it and read about it, for me, it's an extremely real concept.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, it seems that the stories I hear from people who have done the past life regression, that it usually first takes them back to the moment of death. Is that something that you experience?
Regularly. I actually find that about 70% of past life therapy is death therapy, is death trauma, releasing death trauma. So most days of the week when I'm working with clients, I'm seeing them die in front of me, you could say, in a past life. They can be quite dramatic. I mean, I've given you this dramatic example of this young man being shot. Not all cases are as dramatic as that, but some cases are very dramatic. be tortured or raped and brutalized, etc. But once we release that energy, then they get better in this lifetime. So much of it is death trauma release, yeah.
So that is what most people that do this is because they're experiencing some kind of trauma or something in their lives that they can't figure out what's going on, and it's related to a past life, right?
Absolutely, yes. So my clients come to me with a range of problems, Clarissa, a wide range of issues, from anxieties, phobias, depression, lack of confidence, physical illness. So much physical illness comes from previous lives. Sexual problems, relationship problems. The list is really almost endless. And so they just sit in front of me and say, well, in front of me, most of my work is online nowadays. So maybe I've got clients all around the world, and we do all the sessions online, and they go so well on Zoom. But yeah, they sit in front of me and they say, I've got this problem. I need help with it. And they usually don't know where it's come from. In most cases, they have no belief in past lives either. In so many cases, they don't know anything about past life regression and reincarnation. It's not in their belief stream. But once the subconscious comes in and they go into trance, it will take them back to the cause or the causes of the problem, which are traumas in the past. So the regression model is that all of our issues as human beings come from locked-in feelings and emotions from past traumas. So the regression concept is to go back into the trauma, open it up, release the energy that's been locked inside the person, the emotion, and then the problem gets better. It's very simple, really, and fascinating at the same time.
Now, you said it could even help with physical ailments. You know, would you say personality disorders as well at times?
Well, that's a good question. I must be honest, I don't think I've ever worked with any personality disorders. What I would say is that it's a problem like any other problem, and it has to come from somewhere. So my sense, without being able to give you a definitive answer, my sense is that there is a good chance that some emotional trauma is in that person's subconscious, which can be causing the personality disorder. But I'll be honest, I haven't worked in that. I haven't worked with that sort of problem before.
That's interesting. Could you give maybe some examples of people you've helped that have had physical ailments and what that related to in a past life?
Yeah. So how many hours have you got, Chris?
Maybe just a couple per,
okay. Okay. One lady came to me with severe psoriasis, skin problem. My experience is all skin problems have got emotional anger. The anger is coming through the skin. So for me, all skin problems are caused by locked-in anger. And she went into several past lives, which are quite interesting. In one of which she lived in Roman times, and she was a woman who was eventually fed to the animals in a Roman amphitheater for being a Christian. In another life, she was in Egyptian times as quite a high up sort of member of nobility who was overseeing some religious rites. She was very strict and unpleasant, and then somebody stabbed her in the back and it was a man. She was a man in that life. Stabbed her in the back, and she died. And actually, the stabbing in the back was a feature of this present lifetime. It had happened many times to her metaphorically, where she'd been betrayed in this life. And so what we found is that there were patterns from the past life that had followed her into this life. So there were several past lives. There is often several lives, usually more than one, with a severe problem. But the eczema started to clear up very nicely. One of the most, a couple of most dramatic ones. One of the most dramatic was a lady who came to me with tumours on her liver. And they weren't cancer tumours, but they were tumours which grow to be the size of melons and grapefruits. And she was in agony. She could hardly move. She couldn't eat. And this particular disease, there's only 12 people in the UK at any one time who suffer from this disease. And hers was the most aggressive. And nobody survives it. But we worked on the emotional traumas which were causing this. And of course, liver disease, again, the liver is the seat of anger. So we worked to release stuff in this life, and we worked into 2 past lives. In one of the past lives, she was a Native American woman who was killed in a raiding party which raided her village, and somebody came up behind her and stabbed her in the back in the liver area. In the second past life, she was a young Polish man in the Second World War who got bayoneted to death by the Nazis. And again, the bayonet went through the liver area and killed her. So, of course, she's brought that energy of trauma into this life in that part of her body. And one of our favourite cases was a lady who came to me, and this lady was in the legal profession. She didn't suffer fools gladly, and she had no concept of all this past life stuff. But she came with a severe back problem, and the back problem had been with her for some time. There was no reason for it. It was in her lower back. She'd even had surgery on it. She went into hospital, they opened her up, they couldn't find anything wrong, so they just stitched her back up and sent her home with painkillers. And the back problem got worse. Her weight got bigger because she couldn't train. She was depressed because she was unhappy with the weight and the pain. And there were 4 past lives that were causing that back problem. The first past life was the big one, the main one. And in this past life, it was the Second World War, and she was a male young Nazi officer who was part of a Nazi team that was going around Europe stealing art treasures and shipping them back to Berlin. At some stage, though, of course, the war starts to go wrong, so she gets shipped off to the Eastern Front. And then she saw herself in, I think, April 1942 or some point in 1942, on the Russian front, so many miles from Moscow. But she said, bear in mind, she said she's laying in trance with her eyelids closed while she's regressed, and she's talking about the past life. And she said, we're about 60 miles from Moscow and we're stuck. We can't get the supplies through. We're stuck in the snow. We're not getting fuel for the tanks and the trucks. There's Russian snipers around. And this young man was terrified. Occasionally the Russians would come and cause a skirmish and then run off again. Then the young man, things seemed to calm down for a while, but then he made the biggest mistake of his life. He was told that in a church, in a village, a Russian village behind the Nazi lines, so it should be safe, there was an icon that could be worth looking at and stealing. So that young man then made the big mistake. Instead of taking an armed escort, he thought, well, it's our village, I'll just hop on a motorbike. So he drives the motorbike a mile or 2 to the village, and then and I'll again demonstrate a little bit dramatically what happened, Chris, and again I'll underplay it because it was a massive response. So she's laying in the chair and I'm saying, okay, so what's happening now? So with her eyes closed, she said, okay, I've found the village, I've got off the motorbike and I've found the church and I'm looking for the entrance to the church. And suddenly she went, ow! She screamed. She jumped about a yard in the air, crashed back in the chair, and started coughing and spluttering and moaning and groaning. I said, what's happened? She said, I've been shot. I've been shot. And the sniper basically had shot her. And then the sniper just left her to die in the snow. So she took about 20 minutes to die in the session, and I obviously let her release that. We went back through that several times, which is something we sometimes have to do in regression. Which isn't fun. We have to go back through the traumas over and over. But the last time we went through it, when the bullet went in, she just hardly moved. So that meant it was cleared. Guess where the bullet went? Straight through the area where the back pain was in this lifetime. As a result of that, the back pain, she came back a couple of weeks later, it was probably about 80% better. We mopped up the other past lives, we did some work to help her with the depression, and her back problem completely dissolved away as though it had never even existed. So
wow, that's amazing.
It's extraordinary stuff. This is such powerful therapy. And I mean, I'm a bit dramatic saying all these dramatic cases. They're not always as dramatic as that. Not everybody screams and yells. Yes, we see lots of tears, we see lots of shaking, but sometimes we get these very dramatic re-experiencing of the trauma for a client, but it gets it out of the body, it gets it out of their energy field, and then they start to heal.
That's amazing. Now, have you ever had any cases that you've been able to actually go back into history books or any documentation and kind of verify that, yes, this was a real past life in person and this person was that person? Has that ever come across?
Do you know, I haven't done a lot of that, Chris, because most of my work is releasing trauma. And so when we're doing this work, I'm not really interested in the narratives or the particular names, addresses, telephone numbers, you could say. I'm not interested in the client's inside leg measurement in their past life in 1450. You know, it's not important. But certainly I've had some very famous cases, and one client came, and this is the subject of my book, Famous Past Lives. There's some clients who appear to have been very famous in the past lives, one of whom was Queen Elizabeth I, the great English queen, the Virgin Queen as we know her. And she came, that was a curious story, because basically she was working in an office, and the man who she worked with, who she knew very well, got on very well with, they were very good friends, not lovers, no romance. He passed her a file one day and touched her hand as he passed the file to her. Immediately she got this image in her mind's eye of a woman in an old wood panelled room, and she got a really strong feeling of frustration, and she couldn't get the image out of her head. It was there all day, every day. Something significant had happened. So when she called me and said, you know, can you help me? What is it? And I made sure she hadn't been smoking anything strange, or, you know, she was sober. It wasn't vodka. And I said, it could be past life. Come and see me. So she came for a session, and we found that, yes, indeed, it was past life. And she actually started to experience the life of Queen Elizabeth I. What she then experienced, because we did quite a lot of sessions after that, because I was fascinated. And she then experienced lots of events that took place in Elizabeth's life, particularly around the love affair that she had with Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. Now, this is known historically, but she put flesh on the bones of their love affair, including the fact that Elizabeth wasn't the Virgin Queen. And in our last session, she came up with something which absolutely floored me. It totally floored me, Chris, because she relived as Queen Elizabeth, giving birth to a child, a son, who was then taken away immediately that she gave birth, smuggled out of the palace, and given to some courtiers or some servants to look after. And she never saw that child again. It was never mentioned, and it was hidden. You know, it was not mentioned in the to the populace. Now, I'm English. I know a little bit about history, and I know, as everybody does, that Elizabeth didn't have any children. So when she relived that in the session, I thought, I don't believe this. You know, I think she must be making this up. And she was a bit shocked afterwards. But I then went online, and I started to see some information about a young man who, in the early 1600s, in his 20s, was shipwrecked off the shore of Spain, off the coastline of Spain. And he was then taken in by the Spaniards, and he claimed to be the love child of Queen Elizabeth and Robert Dudley. And the Spanish people, the Spanish authorities, believed his story, and they actually then looked after him and looked after him as a member of nobility over there. That's not very well known. How my client would have known that is beyond me, because I had to ferret away in the archives to find that. And, you know, you ask 95% of people about Elizabeth, nobody knows that. And then I had, the weird thing is, in another therapy session, I then had Queen Elizabeth's elder sister, Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, came, which was quite bizarre. Now, that lady, again, these are ladies, they've not researched this, they've not studied this. These ladies were housewives from Middle England. They'd not researched these lives, but especially just going back to your question about specific information, my Queen Mary lady came up with such specific information that I had to again ferret away in the history books, and then I found it in the history books. The specific details she's given, not big, broad details, but very small, specific information that would not be known by somebody who, let's say, watches a documentary of Queen Mary on the TV. But she gave these specific details, and that blew my mind, because again, when I found it.
That's very interesting, because whenever you hear a lot of people talk about past life regressions, you hear, oh, I was always this famous person, or I was this king or queen or something like that, but it's less common to have been a famous person than you hear about, right?
That's a myth. One of the myths is that everybody's been Cleopatra or somebody famous, and I've done thousands of sessions. I have come upon some people who've been famous in past lives. In fact, funnily enough, I've just been working with a lady in Oslo who appears to be the reincarnation of Marie Antoinette, of course, who died in the French Revolution. And so it's very strange. It's almost like the universe keeps sending me these people who've been famous. But generally speaking, 99.9% of pets, 99% of sessions were just ordinary common people, soldiers, sailors, plumbers, peasants, farmers, workers, shopkeepers, etc. But of course, somebody has to have been these famous people at some stage, because they are souls, as any famous person is, and they are going to get reborn at some stage.
Now, earlier in my intro, I had mentioned how I believe there is a kind of collective consciousness, and I'm wondering if you believe the same thing, and how that might tie into these past lives, if maybe people are experiencing each other's lives, or have experienced each other's lives in any way. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, certainly I'm sure that there is a collective unconscious, because I think there's a field that we all tap into, an energy field that we all tap into energetically in some way. So I'm okay with that. Whether when people are experiencing or exploring past lives in therapy sessions, they are just simply grabbing a past life out of the collective unconscious, and it could be somebody else's life, I'm actually not so sure. Personally, I don't think it is the case. I really don't think it's the case, because the subconscious of that person accepts that this is their past life. I'm asking, are there any past lives which connect to causing your lack of confidence? And the subconscious, using a technique that I use, will signal to me whether that's a yes or no. And it just seems to be so specific to my clients. Having said that, of course, we're talking about a metaphysical issue here. So it could be, Chris, that that in either some cases or all cases, my client's past life is not necessarily theirs from their past life, but is a different past life. They're just grabbing it, or the subconscious takes them into it in order to clear the problem. I honestly can't say either way. So I'm being a simple fella. I tend to think, okay, it's if the subconscious says it's their past life, it's their past life. But I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I honestly can't.
Right. Well, I mean, if it tends to help them, that also sways you more in the direction that it is their life, if it's really helping indeed with these problems so profoundly,
Yeah. Well, especially, this is probably a better answer for you that's just come to me. Especially when my client goes into a past life and finds that a person who is in their present life is the person in the past life. So that's just that, let's say, for example, I've had a client today who in a past life, her father murdered her and killed her. And in this lifetime, her father has been a brute as well. But I asked the subconscious, and she immediately knew. She said, that's my father. In that past life, that is my father now. And I asked the subconscious, and I checked with it, and it said yes. So that's probably a better answer, that in a lot of cases, the people who are around us in this life in a significant way are around us in those past lives, which really does suggest that these are specific to the clients. That makes sense.
Yeah. What about past lives as animals or even insects? Is that possible?
Yeah. It's a weird side of things. And to be honest, it's an aspect of regression that I still wonder, is it real? is it just my client creating these metaphors in order to get better? Past lives as animals. I mean, one lady was a camel in a past life, and she was so shocked in that regression session, but she said the worst thing was the smell. She was in like a camel yard with all the other camels. She said the stench, the stink of all the camels was awful. I had one lady who was a rabbit in a past life. And as you can imagine, for me, that was a pretty boring session because all she did was hop around in the past life. There wasn't much to hang your hat on. One lady was a rat that got ran over by a car and killed. Another lady was a cat in a Greek temple going looking for mice. So one lady was a squid, a baby squid. And that was a curious thing because she came to me with a spider phobia of spiders. And there were several past lives causing that, one of which was as a baby squid. And what she experienced, and this lady, I mean, bear in mind, Chris, all of my clients are normal people. They're not people who've been in and out of psychiatric units all their life. These are just normal people, either functioning family people, got jobs, in fact, in many cases, business executives. So she went into this past life and she felt that as the baby squid, she was pushed out of the nest beneath the sea by the parent squids too early. But there were a lot of babies being born to the family, so they all had to disperse. And so she went out of the nest into the big wide ocean, and she was terrified in the session. She was shaking because everything was trying to kill her, to eat her. And she spent all the time dodging and running and but swimming away, trying to escape predators. And she was very scared. But then she found a little cave in some rocks, and she sort of snuck herself into the cave and immediately relaxed. She said, "Oh, I feel so calm now. I feel safe in here." This thing's trying to come to the entrance of the cave to grab her, but they couldn't get in. And then all of a sudden, she suddenly realized she wasn't alone. Something else was behind her in the cave, and it started to come towards her, and she was breakfast. So as she shot out of the cave, it grabbed her, and it took off one of her tentacles, but she escaped. But that was a curious thing, but because she escaped, she felt stronger. And she then was happy to swim out in the sea because she knew she could get away from things. So she sort of calmed down. So that was, I mean, weird stuff, and I just have to take it at face value. But we don't get many like that. I mean, it's said that once we've achieved a human rebirth, then usually we don't go back into animal
That's what I was just about to mention. It seems like some kind of consciousness evolutionary process to where we start out maybe as an insect and evolve as an animal and then become humans, would you say?
Possibly. But certainly there's this sort of spiritual idea that once we achieve human life, we don't get reborn as an animal. But I've disproved that. I would say generally it's hard to get reborn as an animal, but it can sometimes happen. And I think that's sometimes because we have to learn something, or we're actually being reborn as an animal to help somebody else in their lives. But it could be that there is this evolution over many, many countless lives where we go through all these different life forms and ultimately become a human. And then, usually we're then here as a human. Although certainly I've had clients who have experienced lives as on other planets, as other life forms.
Just about to ask you that too. Life as an alien.
So that does occasionally happen. Not very often. I mean, I've certainly had one client who was a sort of a strange life form on another planet. And she lived as like a flame entity. That was the only way she could really describe her body. It wasn't really a body, it was more of a flame, but she was still a conscious entity. And I had one client who was a lovely man, a Croatian man, actually. And he started to live a life as an ET, from another planet. And he was coming towards the Earth, and his spacecraft crashed on Earth. And he survived. He managed to survive. And then he sort of, he spent the rest of the session terrified, absolutely terrified that human beings would find him. And he kept saying, what's wrong with them down here? All this aggression, what's the matter with them? It doesn't have to be like this. He kept saying it over and over. What is the matter with them down here? It doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. So he spent some time hiding in case he got picked up. And then, of course, we're into a Roswell incident, perhaps. Eventually, his comrades, his colleagues did come to find him from the other planet. And a bit like E.T. Goes Home, they did then take him back. And he just breathed a big sigh of relief because his race was so much more advanced than we are down here, and so much more peaceful.
Wow, that is amazing. And I want to go back to a second to the consciousness evolution thing. It seems like, to me, in each of these lives, we have lessons to learn. It's kind of like this is a training ground of sorts. And after we learn a certain lesson, we can go to a different life or become a different incarnation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for somebody who studied Buddhism and practiced as a Buddhist very deeply for a number of years, that traditional concept of reincarnation was the concept that I was most familiar with and would follow. And to be honest, I've followed it for many years until recently, and now I'm actually not so sure. And this is not part of the past life therapy stuff that I do. It's stuff that's come up when I've been reading and researching, and I can't find much about this, but I think it's becoming more of a popular concept. So as you say, the traditional concept of reincarnation is that we get reborn over many, many lifetimes. Tibetan Buddhism says over countless lives, many lifetimes, in order to grow and learn as a soul, until ultimately we don't have to come back and do this earthly rebirth thing again. But I've seen stuff recently in the last couple of years that says that we don't have to be reborn, that this is a myth that we have to be reborn. So I'm not saying that I know this, Chris. This is my sort of research at the moment, and I would love to hear from people if they have more specific details, because I'm looking to research this as much as I can.
I find that interesting too, because I've heard that the same thing. You don't have to. That you have a choice to go elsewhere or move on to something else, or whatever comes next.
Yeah. Well, there is certainly one theory is that they call them death traps or soul recycling machines, which are actually being run by aliens who are on the planet, perhaps, I don't know, reptilians or whatever.
Yes, the white light trap, I've heard.
That's it, yeah, that's it, the white light trap, yeah. And so the idea, and some people say it's actually the moon that is a soul recycling machine. So what some people say is that when we die, we go to the light because we think that's where we should go. And very often these beautiful beings come to us and say, come with me and we'll look after you and, care for you. But actually these beings are actually just aliens in disguise who are using very advanced technology to fool us, to fool our souls, that we have to then go with them, learn what we've just had in the life, and then get reborn. So what people say is, hang on, we are perfect as we are. We are perfect beings in the universe. We're all part of source, you could say. Therefore, we are perfect. Therefore, do we have to learn anything? And so what some people are saying is when we die, instead of going to the light or going with these beings, we should just turn our back on them and go elsewhere, go where we feel we need to go. How true this is, I don't know, because it's almost like, how can you prove this? I honestly don't know. And of course, having done so many thousands of death sessions in regression, I haven't actually had a client who has ever experienced this. They've not gone through the death. Usually they go through the death into spirits, experience great calmness, and then sometimes they experience this beings coming to them, or they go to a place of learning where they then get ready for the next lifetime. But I've not had any clients who ever said, oh, this doesn't feel right. That doesn't mean to say it isn't right. It may be that as soon as they get out of the body, the memories get wiped and that programming that you've got to come with us happens, and they're not aware that there is an alternative. But certainly for me, I'm starting to look very seriously at this, because I do wonder if this.
Yeah, that is that's very intriguing too, because I've heard this too and looked into it myself, and also you mentioned that some people go to like this place of learning where they can choose where they, what they want to be, or learn about different things. Could you talk about any of those experiences that you've come across?
Yeah, it almost seems that when we are in spirit, then, I mean, the traditional story then is that we go to a place where we learn about the life that we've just experienced, where we've gone wrong. And because we're not in a human form and our higher self is much more open, we then understand. We don't see everything through human eyes as we do down here. We see it through much bigger, much more wise eyes, you could say. And then certainly I've had some clients who've gone into halls of learning where they've actually had almost elders in spirit who come to them and talk to them and, help them to shape where they're going to get born next in order to learn what they've got to get, what they have to learn in the next life. And so then it's said that what they do is they, or we, sort of make a sort of a template for the life that we're going to move into next. It is a template, apparently, because we do have free will and we can actually change that template once we get born, if we're able to, and as we become more aware and more awakened. So it isn't that everything is set in stone as we plan it. No, there are different timelines that we can choose, and we can go down a different thread. But generally the theme or the main feel of that life is sort of set up for us before we come in. The people who are around us over many lifetimes, it appears that we live in groups of souls. I call them soul clusters. And what that means is that the people who are around us in each life at a close level, parents, children, etc., tend to be clustered around our soul very close. Then, of course, there are other people who were around several lifetimes or many lifetimes, sometimes we're not too close with. But they're interacting with us, we're interacting with them in order for us to learn, for them to learn over many, many lifetimes. So in one way, it's quite simple. In another way, it's very complex and quite extraordinary, really, when you think in those terms of all those different timelines for different people.
Yeah, it is. It's mind blowing to think of the possibilities with this. Now, when it comes to your actual practice of regression, is there any dangers, I guess you could say, or dangers of further traumatization or anything like that has ever happened?
It is just vaguely possible if it's done badly. And like anything else, if you do something badly, if a doctor does something badly, it can make things worse. If a therapist doesn't do the job right, there's a possibility that it can re-traumatize somebody. So the only way that can happen, though, is if the person goes into a past life, into a trauma, and then is brought out too quickly. And I'm sorry to say that there are occasionally some therapists who play at this and they don't see it seriously enough. They're not trained well enough. And what that means is that they sometimes get frightened. If a client goes into something which is emotional, or the client is, as I've demonstrated, crying, screaming, yelling, the therapist might get scared and bring them out. When what they have to do is keep the client in it to go through the trauma, and then it eases right down again. So there is a small possibility, but it's unlikely, having said that, because also the subconscious is there to protect the client. And in the vast majority of cases, it does that. So what I'm often asked, how do I find a past life therapist? And I'm always saying, look, talk to them and ask them how long they've been doing it for and how many sessions they've done. If you've got somebody who's been around quite a long time, they're going to do a decent job. If you've got somebody who's just sort of done 3 regressions or doesn't believe in it and just plays with it, I wouldn't go anywhere near them. This is serious therapy, Chris. It really is.
What are your thoughts on people that do like stage hypnosis? Is there any dangers in that, or putting suggestions in people, something like that?
Yeah, most hypnotherapists don't like stage hypnosis. We spend all our lives putting people back together, and stage hypnotists spend all their lives taking the mickey out of people and then embarrassing, humiliating them. It's unlikely that somebody can be damaged by stage hypnosis, but it is definitely being very badly damaged by stage hypnosis. Certainly there's a case in the UK where a woman died after being on stage and doing a stage hypnosis act. And a healthy young woman, mother of two, nothing wrong with her, went to see a stage hypnotist. She got up on stage, she did all the silly things, she was very hypnotizable. The end of his act, the stage hypnotist, was to get everybody on stage to imagine they'd had 10,000 volts of electricity shoved up the backsides. And then when they experienced this, they'd all jump up and pat the bottoms and leap around as if they'd been electrocuted. And that was the end of the act. He said, as soon as that happens, you'll come out of trance and it's goodbye and see you, thanks for being here. That lady also had a phobia of electricity because when she was young, she'd nearly died through being electrocuted. So, of course, she experienced that. She went home that night feeling very strange, very sick, very unusual. During the night, she had a fit. She choked on her vomit and died. Now, not my belief. Well, it's a belief, but it's a considered belief after 28 years as being a hypnotherapist, is at that stage, a hypnotist killed that woman because her subconscious is awesomely wise. It would say, if I had 10,000 volts of electricity shoved up my bum, that'll kill me. If I have that shoved up my backside, I'll die. Also, she was terrified of electricity, so it caused a big panic inside her. It played on her mind, and her subconscious, then if a body went into a physical response to all of that fear, which in her case was to have choke on the vomit. So in my opinion, it killed her. And certainly there have been other cases. I mean, Paul McKenna, the most famous hypnotist in the world, who nowadays does some fantastic work promoting hypnotherapy and therapies, but of course started out as a stage hypnotist. And certainly one gentleman who did stage work with him claimed to, I think he thought he would become schizophrenic as a result of it. And he went to court, and McKenna won. He didn't get prosecuted. But, when you've been around as I have in this job for such a long time, my belief based on experience is that stage hypnosis is a small possibility it can be dangerous, but it still can be dangerous. And so I'm never comfortable with it. It is funny, but I'm never comfortable with it. I'm really not.
Have you come across clients that just can't be hypnotized? They can't go under?
Yeah. And you've used the word we hate, under. So that's like a red rag to a bull, Chris, when you do that to a hypnotherapist. Yeah. People use the word under because it's almost like you're going to be under anesthetic, under my control, things like that. You go into hypnosis, you go into trance, you don't go under hypnosis. Certainly some people, let me explain it this way. There are 4 abilities at hypnosis. I call them 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Number 1's about 30% of people are very good at hypnosis. 25 to 30% of people naturally gifted when it comes to hypnosis. They have an ability to go into trance. Like some people are gifted at sport or playing musical instruments. These are the Eric Claptons of the hypnotherapy world, you could say. Number 2s are people who are good at hypnosis, and they go into trance really very nicely, not quite as quickly as a number 1, but very nicely and easily. Most people are average at hypnosis. They're number 3s. So what they experience most of the time when they're in trance is a nice relaxed state, but they're still analyzing. The left brain is ticking over quite a lot for a person who's a number 3. A number 4 is somebody who it doesn't suit them at all. There's not many people like this, but it's often somebody who's a bit of a control freak. I'm sorry to say it's usually a man. I'm sorry to say those men are hopeless at times. But it's often somebody who won't let go. They think that something weird is going to happen, or they're scared. So occasionally, I find about once every 2 years, I find somebody who it just doesn't suit, in which case I do other therapy techniques instead. And of course, as with regression, some people just can't regress. It's quite frustrating at times. Even if they want to, sometimes we just can't get them there. So, but most people, I would say well over 90% of people can be hypnotized very nicely and very successfully.
Now, earlier we mentioned just a couple of things that this can help with, physical pain, some, I guess, anxiety could also. What are some other things that this regression could help you with?
Almost anything that a person goes to the therapist with or goes to a doctor with. So lack of confidence, stopping smoking, weight problems, phobias, depression, relationship problems, sexual problems, blockages where you can't seem to move on from something seems to be blocking you, you name it. So many problems that we have, if not all of the problems, come from the emotions that we've locked inside us, which are holding us back. So many things.
Can you give us, before we close out, maybe some of the most profound examples of people that you've come across that you mentioned a few with pain earlier. What are some other ones, maybe some other things that people go to, depression or anxiety or something like that? A few examples, maybe.
Okay. A good one for depression was a lady who came to me. She had a really bad problem with depression. It was really struggling all the time to live her life. And we found, I think there were about 8 past lives that were causing the depression. And there were a range of things. So in one of the past lives, she was a young woman, a very poor woman in Victorian London, 150 years ago, as a flower seller. She was so poor, she was selling flowers. She got sick, she was hardly eating, she was malnourished. She went to a doctor, a quack doctor, to see if he could help her. She was so sick. He then raped her and killed her. So we explored that, we released that. In another of her past lives, she had a young boy who died, and she never got over the death of that child. In another past life, she was a soldier, and in a battle, he committed cowardice. He got terrified and he ran away on his horse, and then the horse dropped down a cliff, and she and the horse died. In another life, I'm just trying to think of them all. There's so many. So about 8 past lives, and we cleared all of those. The depression was completely cleared. And I love working with depression in this way, because the medical myth is that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's pure drivel. It's a lie. It was created by drug companies to sell antidepressants. The cause of depression is locked in anger. That's the cause of depression. And beneath anger, there's usually sadness. So this is why depressives are melancholy. If we can get into those causes that are causing the depression and release them, then the person gets better. A lovely dramatic one I had was migraines with pain. My experience, and this is even, I know, weird, but my experience with migraines is that they are usually caused by deaths in past lives where there have been blows to the head. And what happened is, this young lad came to me, he was about 13, and he was getting migraines every few weeks, and he was missing days and days off school. A very intelligent boy, and it was obviously damaging his schooling. And his mom sat in on the session and sat behind me whilst I did the session, and his subconscious indicated there were 8 past lives causing the migraines. And remember, this is a 13-year-old boy who's a traditional Middle English boy. He doesn't know anything about reincarnation, but he was a very fast worker. So we cleared all of the 8 past lives in 1 hour. Cleared them, which meant he went, and I can't remember the order, Chris, but it was something like, I took him into trance. He went into the first past life, and he was a man standing in a garden whose wife was having an affair, and the wife came up behind him with a big spade, smacked him around the back of the head, and he dies. He falls on the floor and dies. He went straight into the next past life, where he was an old man climbing up some steps, and one of the steps gave way, and he fell down and landed on his head, dead. And he went into the next past life, where he was involved in a car accident, and he had no seatbelt, and as a lorry hit the car, he smashed his head onto the driving wheel, dead. And he went into the next past life, where he was a young boy at school, and he kicked the school bully, so the school bully got hold of him and smacked his head against the wall lots of times. His mum takes him to hospital, but he's dead before he gets there. He went into the next past life where he's in a bar brawl and somebody beats him down, hits him on the head, beats him down in a bar, and then starts kicking him in the head, dead, etc., etc. We cleared all of those 8 past. That could have taken some clients 8 sessions. All of them were cleared in 1 hour. He came out and just sat there open-mouthed. She just sat with completely open-mouthed. Completely cured the migraines. Completely cured the migraines. Do you want another one?
That's awesome. You mentioned, I want to ask you that you said that the person's subconscious tells you about the past lives. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I use a technique which in hypnotherapy is called an idiomotor response. It's a motor neuron response. So I take the client into trance, then I ask the subconscious to come through into one of the hands by making a finger on the hand or a thumb very, very light. And what happens is the client is then laying there, imagining the finger getting lighter and lighter, and a finger starts to move all by itself. And that, therefore, is under the control of the subconscious, not the conscious mind, but the deeper mind, which knows everything about the client. And I then ask the subconscious just to use that finger to signal yes or no. If it moves the finger up in the air, that's a yes. If the finger stays still, that's a no. This happens independently of the client. The client is just then laying in trance, aware of, sometimes not aware of the finger moving. Then I ask questions of the subconscious. So let's say they come with a phobia. Is there anything in this present lifetime that's caused the phobia? We may get a yes. Are there any past lives that's causing the phobia? Again, if we get a yes, I then find out how many past lives. I just count upwards and the finger raises when I reach the exact number of past lives. So the subconscious is involved all the way, and I'm relying on the subconscious in most cases to guide me as to where we need to go, and it does that very beautifully and very elegantly. So it means that we take the guesswork out of therapy, Chris. Most therapists are guessing, what do I do? In this case, the subconscious tells us, we've got a past life to go into, let's do it.
Man, it seems like there's so much that could be solved through this if more therapists would take this seriously, and it would become a more widely practiced. We could have it seems like a more healthy, better society, you know?
Absolutely, yes. For me, and I talk about the dramatic cases because they are dramatic, but for me, this is the most powerful therapy that I know. I've trained in many therapies over 28 years. It's the deepest and most effective. And for me, it should be accepted as a credible psychotherapeutic discipline, not as some new agey, weird, woolly-minded thing. It isn't about that at all. It is so damned effective. And when you have a client who has no idea about, in fact, some cases, they don't believe in past lives. They disbelieve in the concept, but they go into a past life and they get better. Okay, there's something very big here happening. And of course, as you quite rightly say, if more people had it, then people are getting rid of their emotional baggage. They're getting more balanced. And as each individual human being becomes more balanced, the world becomes more balanced. People become less reactive, less angry, less defensive. So it can cure so many problems. It can make the world a better place. I truly believe that.
Yeah, it definitely could. That's awesome. Now, if people are interested in this more and they are interested in getting a regression, how can they get in touch with you, and if they're looking for more information?
Okay, so my book is The Power of Past Life Regression. That's available everywhere now on the internet, Amazon, etc., Noble and Barnes and Noble, and also from my website. I have a website which is lionheart-training.com. Lionheart, as in Richard the Lionheart, -training.com. I do also have a WordPress site which is hypnoblogpod.wordpress.com. I have a Facebook page, The Power of Past Life Regression. What I do love to recommend is people go on my free YouTube channel, which is Hypno for All. That's HYPNO number 4 ALL, Hypno for All. Which has got 20 free hypnotherapy recordings on there for everybody to listen to. I just want hypnotherapy out into the world. They're all professionally recorded. So there are a number of ways of getting hold of me. Probably the best way is lionheart-training.com. There's a contact form on there and my email address. Yeah, those are the best places, I think, Chris.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Steve. That was fascinating information. I really think more people should look into this, and this should be a more widely practiced thing. It sounds fascinating, and I'd love to have a regression done myself. I think that would be that'd be awesome. I'm not sure how open to hypnotism I am, but I am a man.
Yes. Well, call me. I mean, as I said, I do 90% of my sessions online nowadays. They go so well. I resisted doing online sessions for years, but now I wish I'd done it years ago. And I obviously have clients. I had my first client in Vietnam a few weeks ago, and my first one in Canada this week. So I've got clients everywhere. I love doing it online. The sessions go so well. So yeah, let me do a session with you. Come on, let's see where we go. That'll give you something to talk about on another program.
Yeah, definitely would. Yeah, I might have some very interesting past lives. Well, Steve, thank you so much again, and I'd love to have you back on in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chris. Thanks so much for having me. I do appreciate it. Thank you.